Hello, Let's Do Video viewers. Welcome back and welcome to the boardroom for the first time. Adam Heimlich, can you please introduce yourself?
Yeah, thanks, David. My name's Adam. I'm the founder CEO of Chalice AI. That's a 5-year-old advertising technology startup. It's built around the idea that advertisers should have their own AI to use as an alternative to the algorithms of Google, Facebook, and the rest.
Now, I appreciate you being here, and some of my viewers might be confused because usually we're talking about business communications on this show, but we've also been talking a lot about AI. And I'm interested in ad tech. We'll get to this later, but I saw you testifying in Congress. I used to be an attorney, so when law and technology combine, I start paying attention. But what really drew me to Chalice is there's something analogous to something big that's happening in my industry, the business communications industry. And that's the custom AI thing that you were talking about. Now, my viewers may know that Zoom has something called Zoom AI Studio. Microsoft something has something called Microsoft Copilot Studio. And the idea is, sure, anyone can sign up and pay and use Copilot, but you can kind of make your own Copilot. You could have it running on your own servers and give it your own data. So instead of just giving you general answers, it knows your stuff and it gives you better answers. And I'm not an ad tech guy. From listening to you, on YouTube and reading your LinkedIn posts and checking out your website. Is that what Chalice does with ad tech?
A little bit, I would say about halfway. I'll start by saying, like, anyone who's involved in any sort of marketing is involved with data, right? You have to have some idea of who your message is supposed to reach, who it reaches ideally, and some way to keep track of whether or not your message is having its intended effect. So that's going to bring you into the world of data where you're doing content marketing or influencer marketing or right digital advertising, where I focus. What I was talking to the Senate Judiciary Committee about was a monopoly over data. And Google has since been convicted in that federal antitrust case for trying to maintain a monopoly on some kinds of data, especially search data, which has, of course, a lot of purchase intent embedded within it. So the connection to AI is that control over data. Data is the fuel for AI. So it's sort of like we're in the beginning of the Industrial Revolution, and there are these beginning of fights over oil. And what happened was that the Rockefellers like dominated the market for oil, and U.S. antitrust law started with breaking up that monopoly. So it's kind of a continuation with the U.S. Department of Justice convicting Google of trying to have a data monopoly to fuel all AI. Now, these big tech pilots like Copilot and Gemini, they will customize to an extent, but not to the extent that it's private to you, right? You cannot keep your data from them, and it's difficult or impossible to keep them from using your data to train their models for other things, right? Like to help your advertisers, and that's really bad in advertising where you're competing directly, right? If you have a customer list and you're making models off that customer list and it's shared with your competitors, you've given away a really big part of your advantage. So the idea of Chalice that we founded 5 years ago was that AI is so powerful, and it's becoming so portable with cloud, right? As you say, you could download these models onto your servers. And now we've had this very extreme example of DeepSeek, which is a much more cheaply produced model that's totally open source that you can run on your own servers and not share any data. And it's still super powerful. So we have the same idea really as DeepSeek, that this thing could be really light and inexpensive, and you could use it with trust to put your own data in it and get your own outputs. Now, Chalice goes further than DeepSeek. We're not just providing answers and models, we're actually deploying them in advertising technology, which is a much more vertically specific, and it brings you to a lot of nuance of how advertising works. But very important to Chalice that we actually deploy these models in what's called ad tech platforms, like supply side platforms and demand side platforms and publisher platforms and other places where these advertising auctions take place.
It's funny. It seems like sometimes we very strongly do not want our data to be used, and sometimes we very strongly do want our data to be used. It's when you sign up for Zoom AI Companion or Microsoft, you get these notifications saying your data will not be used to train our model because there's so much bad publicity about using your data, and I'm like, I kind of want you to use my
Yeah.
data to train my model because then it will be good to work for me. So,
Yeah.
right?
There's a lot of in between examples, like your medical data. You're like, of course, I don't want to share my medical data, but if your medical data can help other patients, then you do want it to be used, right? It's all about how it's how it's used, right? It's whether or not it's exploitative. But a much clearer example is our big B2B data sets, big business data sets, like who's a Verizon owns who's a Verizon subscriber, and T-Mobile owns who's a T-Mobile subscriber, and own that data. And there's no question for these big companies, they don't want this shared, they don't want it out, they don't want a model to be built off that and used by their competitor. So that's really where we focused our pitch before people really understand all the nuances and complications and ethics around data sharing. We're starting with the really clear example of this. If you're such a big advertiser that you have enough data to train a predictive model of who you should target with which creative message to get the best output for your money, um, you should create that yourself and you should own it. You should deploy it wherever you want. And we really hope that was an easy sell. It turns out to be a pretty hard sell because it's so different than the way they do things today. But that's not to complain. We're doing all right. And it's becoming increasingly clear to large advertisers that the models that could be built from their data set are potentially assets, right? Brand assets, just like their creative that they should own and control.
Now, the other thing that I learned about Chalice from chatting with you before the show and from checking out the website is there's another there's another level of the results you can get from your advertising. I always thought of advertising as you put it out there and cross your fingers and next quarter look at the sales numbers. In my mind, the biggest advertising story from our industry is pre-pandemic when Zoom started putting things up in the airports. Because people hate the airports and be like, oh, I gotta fly. Oh, I could be on a Zoom meeting instead. And but who knows what the results were? But everyone thinks that was a big win because everyone was talking about it. And of course, the biggest advertisement for our industry was the pandemic itself. But looking at your website, and from my metrics, when I do a video like this for my clients, I say, hey, we got 1,000 views, and that's the end of the story. You have another level of results. You don't just say, we had X amount of views or Y amount of impressions. You have values for them because, and it seems obvious that there's different values of impressions. If someone clicks it and says that was a mistake and closes it, that's not very valuable. If someone goes on to buy, that's more valuable. And there's all this in between. And I didn't think that's something advertising does in general, but you guys do that. Did I understand that correctly?
Yeah, that's what AI is bringing to advertising. It's like the answers are in the data. Like humans are very biased. Like you think, oh, whatever, I'm selling video calls, I should advertise in airports. And maybe it's true, maybe it's not. But there actually is an answer of what that ad is worth to you and what's the most you should be willing to pay. And it's embedded in the data. like if you run that campaign, sometimes even before you run the campaign, the answer is already in there. And I think we're starting to experience with AI tools this kind of phenomenon that the answer is much closer than it used to be. Like, you search, it used to be you go to libraries, then you search, you find a bunch of links and read a bunch of articles and find out. Now you could just be like, what are the best sites in Tokyo, Japan for kids under 5? And they've done all that research and come back. So it's almost like that, right? Right. It's so easy to get that it's almost like your knowledge. And that's what we're trying to say to brands is like whether or not you should buy this ad is already in your data. And you just need to run it through the AI tool and get the answer, right? So it's not like you have to spend years working up to AI. You just have to run these models on the data that you already have. So that's what we're trying to tell people is like this world of guessing what an ad opportunity is worth could be over tomorrow if you want it, if that's what you want. But they tend to move into it very slow because it's such a disruption to how they usually make decisions about advertising. But it's really, really cool. We could take a brand in a month from like a 1925 advertising process to a 2025 advertising process. Like it's all there in the data.
That's even more than I thought. What I thought you were going to say is, yeah, after we do the campaign, we get the metrics and we see where the clicks went and where the views went, and we're able to analyze that with AI and see the results. But you're telling me that beforehand, when you're like doing I think there's like a bidding sort of, I don't know ad tech lingo, but when you're deciding where to buy your ads, that's when you already have that information beforehand.
Yeah, there's a lot of aggregated information. Like if you have a customer list, that's really the basis, right? If you have a customer list, and we have a data set of every household in the US, then by comparing your customer list to every household in the US, we get a pretty good idea of who you should be targeting next, right? And then if you start to add values to that customer list, well, these guys, their basket size was this, and these stayed for 6 months, and these stayed for 8, right? And this is the websites where we found them, right? As you start to add all that nuance, and you get a lot more information of the values of who else you could target, and then, right, start to project where you'd find them and for what cost and how many impressions you need to serve them. But once you're running campaigns, yeah, you get a whole bunch of other insights. Like before you run the campaign, you can't really know the optimal frequency, time of day. You don't really know the difference between showing them an ad on Netflix or Prime. But as you start to get all that nuance, there's like a whole other level of it being fine-tuned and more accurate, right? It's just the more variation, the better. It's the opposite of our minds. In our minds, the more variation, the more complicated, the more we just want to guess. The machines just get more and more accurate as you give them more and more data. So it's another thing that very big advertisers should realize, like, this is easier for you. The amount of complexity and the amount of money you're spending makes it easier to unlock the answers of what's best for you to do.
It seems like AI is turning ads from an art to a science. I used to think of it as an artsy sort of profession to be in. I'm gonna make videos and do storyboards. And there was a movie with Tom Hanks where he was in advertising. He did all sorts of fun stuff. And then you hope that people will like it. It's like making a rock video or something. But it's really just becoming like, I don't want to say boring, but it's becoming math and science. It's becoming, okay, this is what the algorithm says. Here's our best buy. Let's just do it and make some money.
I'm just talking about media buying here. So, the creative of an advertising is a big deal and makes a big difference. And AI is not good at creating ads yet. But I think that's one argument is, they're not very good at making ads. They don't have novel ideas. You're still going to need people to figure out the best way to deliver a message and to position the brand in people's minds. But it really depends on where a brand is at. Like in the early stage of a brand, they're just trying to get to 100% awareness, right? Starting with the people who care most that this product exists. And when your job is really to tell people that the product exists, if the media buying is really good, all you have to do is tell them the product exists and they'll buy it, right? Right? That's the first stage, right? So the creative, and you see this on Instagram, very simple creative that's saying, here's what we have, here's what it does, here's a picture, right? And everyone's had this experience. As soon as you see on Instagram, you're like, I want that. Oh, a camera that fits on top of my laptop. During the pandemic, there are tons of them, like home office gadgets that as soon as you saw it, you bought it because it solves a problem for you. So that's a way that the media buying does simplify the job of creative. But it gets much more nuanced and much harder as a brand matures and you get past the stage of, essentially selling a gadget to people who need that gadget.
Okay, so we'll still have some art within the science. It makes me happy. Uh,
Yeah, there always will be. Anything that's never happened before, AI isn't good at. People say, oh, there's one-shotting and AI can learn everything all at once. But from my experience, AI is not very good with stuff that never happened before. And every ad campaign has elements of something that never happened before, right? Even if nothing in your brand changed, the market has changed.
yeah,
So it's always,
I'm a big fan of AI for creative, but I'm still creating my own stuff. It's helping me. It's giving me
yeah.
ideas, giving me someone to talk to when I don't want to bother a friend. But yeah, I'm still for now having to create my own stuff. Um,
The way I keep my head straight about what I can and can't do is to think about documents. AI, the fuel for AI is documents. It's some kind of data set or text set, and a whole document. Essentially, just like I was saying about tourist sites for kids in Tokyo, like that information is essentially in our heads because you just type the question and you get it, and that's because it's been documented somewhere. But what should my ad say to sell my video services? It's not documented. So
yeah,
it's never going to be right. Like it'll put other documents together and give you something okay. But the way I think about it is the entire documented world is now there's no value in like carrying those documents around or summarizing them. It's essentially done. So all human work should be on stuff that's undocumented. It can't be documented.
new stuff, creative stuff.
Yeah. Novel, creative, or just hidden.
Now, one thing that just amuses me to no end is on social media. Every once in a while, someone will post something about ad tech, technology, and it'll be stuff that I don't understand because I don't understand the lingo, but it'll be something like, it's too bad that if you use this methodology, there's that 5% error rate that gets added to it, and there's no way to get around that. You say, oh yeah, at Chalice, we got around that. We have a custom thing, and we're able to use that methodology without the error rate. And the person will say, no, you obviously don't because that's impossible. And you'll be like, DM me. And then they'll post back and say, he actually can do it. And there's been like every few months there's one of these. It just seems like there's a lot of things about Chalice that I think the ad tech world has taken for granted can't be done or shouldn't be done or just don't need to be thought of. And your team is looking at it from a different angle. I'm like, yeah, we can figure out a way to do that.
A lot of it's time and work, right? We hired a great team of data scientists and gave them full freedom to experiment. And we're advertising professionals who founded the company. So we're very specific about the problems we wanted them to solve. We're always with an eye to the future. Like this is what's going to be frustrating advertisers 2 years from now. And can you solve this? And so it's really not surprising that if we founded in 2020 and focused a bunch of PhD data scientists who were paying good salaries to solve a certain set of problems, that they got there. But I think until last week, was it this week that DeepSeek came out? There's still doubt being like, you guys didn't raise millions of dollars. Like, you don't have NVIDIA chips, so you really can't have solved these problems. And I think now people are waking up saying, no, it's actually not about that. It's having good data scientists, putting the right problems in front of them, paying them enough that they stay at the job, and giving them equity, of course, so they have a stake in the result, and then going through trial and error. I think something people miss is that it's a lot of trial and error, and when you're a startup, that it feels good to do trial and error. When you're a big company, trial and error doesn't feel good, and I
Mm.
think they advance more slowly because they're afraid of making mistakes and overplan their projects. Where like we just hire people and really encourage them to tinker with the tools until they get something.
Yeah, yeah. Company culture is an important thing, and um, yeah, it's a tough job market out there. There's a lot of unpleasant places to work, and I see a lot of pictures of your team out at dinners, toasting and smiling, and it's obviously more than just barking orders and setting deadlines and expecting programming. You've built a great team there. So uh,
Yeah, mission, being a remote company, I've talked to other people who founded remote companies, and I did it in the pandemic, but there in ad tech, there are actually a bunch of remote from birth companies that go back further. There's a guy named Jay Friedman who leads a very big agency called Goodway Group that's always been remote, and I've taken some guidance from him. Um, and the most important thing he says is to be mission focused. Like a mission focused company can be remote and the tools are good enough, and you don't need to be in person if people have common understanding of the mission and are motivated toward that mission. So we've always tried to keep that. And then, like you said, the pictures we post with offsites, bringing people together twice a year is really important, especially when you bring on new people. There's just no substitute for people going to karaoke together in New York City and stuff like that. So we make sure we do that a couple of times a year. But um, being a remote company and doing all our meetings on Zoom has worked out for us. But it does take work, and yeah, we will be looking at your offerings to see if you can improve our virtual experiences.
yeah. Oh, I gotta send you a video. I have a new toy that gives me eye contact in Zoom. It's so cool. But I'll send you the
Yeah,
video on that.
just be able to sit at the boardroom table like this might be really good.
Yeah, yeah. So, and we've been talking about startup and everything, but you're big now. You've worked with some big companies. I see a case study with Hershey's because I have marketing friends at Zoom and some big companies out there. I don't want them to think that you're the new kid on the block.
Yeah,
Uh,
no, I did 30 years in advertising agency before I founded Chalice. My co-founder and wife, Ali, in the other room, was a Google executive with a lot of brand relationships. So we've definitely have a lot of experience serving the biggest advertisers and the biggest brands. I say Hershey is a flagship client of ours. We also work with Hyundai, Kia, Genesis, Hyundai Motors USA, and some other very big clients. So the big advertiser challenges are our favorite because of the complexity and of course the available data.
okay, so all my friends in the industry for all these years who are on the marketing teams, you should talk to Adam. How do they talk to Adam?
Oh yeah, LinkedIn is I'm a big LinkedIn person. You can always reach me there. And my email is adam@chalice.ai. Less responsive on email.
All right, I'll put the LinkedIn link down below.
Yeah, great.
All right, any final thoughts before we wrap it up?
Can we take a ride in the car?
Oh, I don't know if I could do it from this seat here.
Can do
I
it
need to
live,
set it up.
dragon or
Let me see.
anything?
I got a dragon, but I don't know what's going to happen. Oh, we're both kind of on the dragon. Here we go.
Yes.